Guys, it's good to see you all back. I hope you had a good Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, Simchat Torah, and Shmini Atzeret. Obviously, we took a break for the Chagim, and there's obviously been some sad news since we got together last, and that's why we're dedicating this particular shir to somebody. We all know somebody that has passed away during this period, but sometimes you lose a close friend, and you have close friends that lose very close family members and spouses. So this particular shir, I want to dedicate to Kim Lieb, who was Horwitz. Johnny Lieb, as we all know, lost his wife Kim Horwitz on the night of Yom Kippur from COVID. She had been sick for many weeks. Unfortunately, I didn't know because being in lockdown, I just wasn't aware of what was going on, and Gavin thankfully informed me. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background, both in terms of the Horwitz family as well as Kim, as well as Johnny Lieb. So Johnny Lieb, we've all known for many years. I mean, Arthur met him before he went to Israel, but Arthur knew Shomain and Lionel Horwitz and Gad and Lawrence and Kim very, very well, because when Arthur started becoming frum, he used to come with me to the Horwitz family.
I have good memories, I must admit.
Yeah, I think Arthur knows Johnny Lieb a little bit less, but Johnny Lieb is Johnny. I just firstly want to wish you long life, and may Hashem comfort you. I know obviously Kim was your soulmate, and we can't even possibly imagine what you're going through as a husband, nor can we imagine what Lawrence and Greg are going through as siblings. And especially also Shomain and Lionel, to lose a child, it's unfathomable. And all of us knew Kim Horwitz. I mean, I knew Kim from Bnei Akiva camp. When I landed up in the sick bay there, Kim didn't know me from a bar of soap, but she heard I wasn't well and came to visit me. She thought I was in Gurim instead of one of the older groups because I looked like 15 years younger than my age, because of my growth retardation. So she said to me, "Hello, little boy, how are you feeling?" So that was the first time I met Kim Horwitz. And then obviously years later through Dan, I met Greg and Lawrence. And I just wanted to let all of you know that Shomain and Lionel Horwitz have not only offered me a second home for the last 20 odd years, where I feel like it's a home away from home, but they've made everybody in the community feel that they have a home, that they have somewhere where they feel loved and cared for, and been helped keep people involved, both with Yiddishkeit and understanding what a Shabbos and Yom Tov environment should be like. And I consider both the Horwitz family and Johnny Lieb very dear friends of mine, and I'm sure you consider the same. I didn't know if any of you wanted to say anything, but I'm actually not just speaking on my behalf, I'm speaking on behalf of all of you. Would you like to say something, mate?
Yeah, I remember Lionel the one time when we had Pesach, and you put the mutz on your shoulder, you walked around the table.
That's right.
And they have such a special vibe in that family. I mean, when you come from a thing where you're totally secular, you often feel like you're judged. And Lionel never did that. Lionel just welcomed you in.
Yeah. Absolutely. And both Shomain and Lionel, I mean, obviously you had chats with Lionel because you sat at the guy's side of the table.
Yeah.
But it took both of them to create that sort of amazing.
Remember, there's always a woman behind the man.
Yeah. And Kevin and Gavin, I don't know if you wanted to say anything to Jonathan Lieb or Lionel Shomain and the two brothers, Greg and Lawrence Horwitz.
Well, obviously, I want to wish all of them a long life. And the ones that I know well really is Lionel and Charmaine and Johnny. So as far as Lionel and Charmaine goes, they've been incredibly hospitable to me. They've been unbelievable. Exactly what Arthur just said is that despite you being new in the religion and having, you've got tattoos on, you don't have tattoos, whatever your case is, who you married, who you didn't marry, a goy or whatever, they accepted you for who you are, and they generously welcomed you into your house with no preconceived notions or ideas. And I also had wonderful chats and lovely chats with Lionel on business and all those type of matters which I really enjoyed. So really, really a warm family. And Lionel's actually helped me in years gone by once or twice with the lulav and etrog. And again this year, Johnny helped me with the lulav and etrog. There was nothing available. I don't know where he got it from. I don't know where it's from. But somehow he managed to organize me a lulav and etrog this year in one of his probably worst years ever. Emotionally, it must be really difficult. So I really want to thank the Horwitz family and the Lieb family for everything they've done for all of us.
Excellent, Kevin.
Okay, yeah. So I think I only went there once or twice, but just the warm people, and I think Lionel came from Bloemfontein, so he's got that country, that like chilled, very accepting way, and it's permeated into their whole family, and also like always friendly, the Simcha person and the Simcha family, and Johnny I saw when I was there actually. I was supposed to bring some.
Oh, when you came to visit South Africa, you saw.
Yeah, I saw him twice actually. We had two chats.
Okay.
He came to Dublin, the minion outside, and always guy who loves Emunah into the teachings of
Incredible Emunah. Incredible.
And and he was a special guy too, and they were married for, I think I was actually at the wedding, and just lovely to be at the chuppah, at Johnny and the late Kim's chuppah. I mean, it was a wonderful special simcha, and they should only have simchas and bracha and nachas and going forward into the future.
Correct. So this learning both today and our learning that we're having in mind, obviously until the end of Shoshim, will be dedicated to Tamar bat Aryeh. Aryeh is Lionel's Hebrew name. Aryeh is my father's Hebrew name. In many ways, Lionel's like a father to me as well. And I wish, obviously, Lieb Horwitz, that her neshama has an elevation. Kim went through a lot of difficulties in her life, had a lot of challenges, always warm and considerate of other people. Many people went through her challenges, they would have been bitter, but she was actually compassionate towards other people. So this learning will be dedicated to Tamar bat Aryeh. And guys, over the next, until the Shoshim period is over, which I think would probably be about the 10th or 11th of Cheshvan, because based obviously on the 30 days. If you want to learn a little bit of Mishnayos, I mean, we need to do the Mishnah for Bava Kamma anyway. So every day, if you learn one Mishnah from Bava Kamma, which we need to do for Chazorah for the Gemara Shur, and have Kim in mind, that'll be great. There's halacha that we learn. Now we're going to do a Mishnah today after Kevin Marathor teaches us the halacha. We're then going to do a Mishnah, and that Mishnah and the Hebrew letters Neshama are linked. So there's a custom to learn Mishnayos, and we're going to do the Gemara. So we're going to start the new Gemara section on the 52nd daf of Bava Kamma with Kim in mind. Kevin, can you teach us halacha before we start the Mishnah and Gemara shir?
Okay, so as you know, I go to Ranana at least once a month for Shabbos to my good friend Simon Shapiro, and in the shul, they actually had a publication compiled by Rav Stuart Weiss from the Jewish Outreach Center of Ranana, Guide to Observing Shemitah. This year, as you know, from Rosh Hashanah, this year is the Shemitah year, which means farmers cannot harvest, and they have to leave their fields fallow. And it's basically based on Emunah, that Hashem is the provider, and He provides a miracle of rain, crops will grow. So that's what Shemitah is. It's called the sabbatical year. Sabbatical in English means you have a break from things and you take a year off. Lahavdil, people go abroad, overseas, etc. So Shemitah mainly in Israel refers to produce and farming and harvesting, etc. So I'll just do one or two things. So the first thing it says here, what is the mitzvah of Shemitah? It says the Torah commands us to refrain from various forms of agricultural activity each 7 years in Eretz Yisrael. So it's in 7 years' time, in 2028, will be another Shemitah year. Well, whatever the Hebrew year is. Okay. These activities include sowing, planting, pruning, reaping, harvesting, and in general, improving the land. The seventh year is referred to as Shemitah or Shvi'it, which is 7. Okay. References in the Torah to Shemitah are found in Shmot chapter 23 and chapter 24, Vayikra chapter 25. Those of Shemitah today are rabbinic until it is established that the majority of the world's Jews will reside in Israel, Ezrat Hashem, at which time the laws will be Torah status, and it says in brackets, Midoraita. So it's rabbinic at the moment. It is also prohibited to sell and do business with Shemitah produce that was generated in a prohibited manner. So in Israel, let's just discuss this point here. When either you or Gavin make Aliyah one day, please God, hopefully not in the too distant future, you need to buy, even if you're not doing a Shemitah, you need to buy fruit and vegetables from most of the major supermarket chains or a greengrocer that has a Tudat Kashrut. If they're Tudat Kashrut, then they'll comply with the rules of Shemitah. You can't go to some of these supermarkets, the 24-hour supermarkets that are open on Shabbos, they ain't got no Tudat Kashrut. So, and they will have a special certification that they are complying with the Shemitah, and it's quite safe. So that's also just a word of advice for you guys when you come, to only buy fruits and vegetables from a place that's got a Tudat Kashrut, because they're definitely the ones that ain't going to be complying with Shemitah, and they don't also, those ones that don't have a Tudat Kashrut don't take away Truma and Maisa, which is, you take away a portion for the Levi. And that is automatically done by all the major supermarket chains and these places with Tudat Kashrut. So I just wanted to mention that it's also a very important factor to keep in mind when you live in the country and you want to observe Kashrut.
Yeah, and that's very informative. That's very useful.
So what does the symbol look like when you go there, if we go to Israel, in terms of how to buy? Do they give
okay, so it's not a symbol, it's a certificate which says
it's a certificate, okay.
To that kashrut of the Beis Din of Ramat Gan, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, each city has their own rabbanut, rabbinical authority, which issues the certificate. So you'll see it displayed in the store. Otherwise you ask, but I always look for it. I may have on one or two occasions slipped and bought from a non-kosher certified fruit and vegetable store, but all the major supermarket chains, Rami Levi, Osha'ad, Shupersal, Yochananov, Bitan, Mega, all of them, none of them are open on a Shabbos, so that's right, otherwise I won't get a kashrut certificate. But you'll see it displayed somewhere in the store. And also by the butchery section, they have one, and the fruit and vegetable section, especially now. Maybe not the fruit and vegetable section, but the butchery section will have it, but possibly now they'll have it. I saw one in another supermarket, a separate one that they're complying with Shemitah, over and above the normal Tudat Kashrut certificate. Okay,
perfect. Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I wanted one of you to read the Mishnah, having in mind Tim Lieb, née Horwitz for Tamar, but Aryeh. And I tell you why I want Arthur to read it is because obviously Kevin's done obviously the halacha in that memory. Gavin was nice enough to tell me that obviously Kim had passed away, because unfortunately, I don't really know what's going on in the community. I've been in lockdown, which means at least I don't. I just not aware of what's going on. And Gavin, it should be known in his kindness, let me know so I could that day make a plan and run to see the family. I couldn't. I didn't want to delay at all, but I didn't know without Gavin's kindness. So Gavin did this kindness. Obviously, Kevin did the kindness of learning halacha and teaching me and you guys. So Arthur, if you can read the Mishnah, that'll be a great conclusion before I teach the Gemara. Just give me 1 second, mate.
Going into the big screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share it. Tell me if it's clear to you, Arthur.
Yeah, I can read it now.
Just read it carefully and slowly. Thanks, mate.
The Mishnah continues its discussion of the bor belonging to partners. If the first one covered the pit after he used it, and the second one then came to use it and found it uncovered, and he did not cover it, the second one is exclusively liable for any damage it does. The Mishnah now discusses liability for any bor. If one covered a pit properly, and nevertheless an ox or a donkey walking over it fell into it and died, he is exempt. If he did not cover the pit properly, and the ox or the donkey fell into it and died, he is liable. The Mishnah turns to a case where an animal was caused to fall into a pit by an external factor. If the animal fell forward because of the sound of a person digging, the owner of the pit is liable. If it fell backwards because of the sound of the digging, he is exempt. The Mishnah discusses what type of damage the owner of the pit is liable to pay for. If an ox with its utensils fell into a pit and the utensils broke, or a donkey with its utensils fell into a pit and the utensils tore, the owner of the pit is liable to pay for the damage to the animal, but is exempt for paying for damage to the utensils. If an ox that is deaf, deranged, or young fell into a pit, the owner of the pit is liable. If a young boy or girl, or a Canaanite slave, or a maidservant fell into the pit and died, the owner of the pit is exempt.
Excellent. Well read, mate. Firstly, Arthur, thank you for reading the Mishnah so well. Just wanted to bring up a couple of points to everybody. Is that if we start off and say that there's a slight spelling error, it says the Mishnah continues its discussion of a bor belonging to partners. The word bor, meaning pit, is separate to the word belonging. For some reason, the Schottenstein missed a spacing there. So the first time I read it, I didn't know what was going on. So just know there's a slight error there. If the first one covered the pit after he used it, and the second one came and used it and found it uncovered and he did not cover it, the second one is exclusively liable for any damage it does. So that we've just learned is a case where he's liable when he gets handed over the cover, etc. But the minute the first person becomes aware, he shares liability. So that's just a quick summary. Just a quick discussion. If one covered a pit properly and nevertheless an ox or a donkey walking over it fell into it and died, he is exempt. If he did not cover the pit properly and an ox or donkey fell into it and died, he is liable. So that is obvious. We don't need to talk about the fact that if there's no proper coverage, you're liable, and if there is proper coverage, you exempt. That's obvious. We're talking about a case where exemption, how far does it go? In other words, we're talking about weight category of animals. Does the pit, the cover of the pit, suffice to only deal with the weight of an ox or a donkey, or does it have to be strong enough to withstand anything from internal rot and worminess to the weight of a camel? What sort of conditions create liability, and what sort of remedies do you have to make in order to have a full exemption? And for example, the Gemara is going to go through, if a camel that was heavy caused the initial, crack or weakness within the cover, but an ox or donkey fell into it, but it wasn't the animal that caused the initial crack, fell into it, but it was sturdy enough just for an ox's weight, would that mean you're exempt? Because the Mishnah says it was a proper covering for an ox or donkey, or should you have taken into account that there were camels that could have passed that particular location? So one of the things we deal with in the Gemara to follow is the frequency of what sort of other weight category animals would cover that territory and obviously trespass off over the manhill in the public domain. And in that particular case, if there's a high statistical probability of other animal weight categories going on and weakening the cover, there would be liability. If it's a case where it's infrequent, maybe there's no liability, or maybe there's partial liability. And we're also going to cover the ground and saying, look, if you're negligent in one degree, in other words, you haven't taken into the account of the category of weight for camels, but it wasn't the camel that actually created a problem, but it was worminess. In other words, rot within the wood. Because you were negligent in one area, does that make you negligent in another area? So that's one of the factors we're going to be going through. Then the Mishnah turns to a case where an animal was caused to fall in a pit by an external factor. Now, just one thing to bear in mind, it said if the animal fell forward because of the sound of a person digging, the owner of the pit is liable. If it fell backwards because of the sound of the digging, he is exempt. Now, in one case, because of the sound of the digging, which startled the animal, you liable. And in another case, equally, there's a sound of the digging which startled the animal, you exempt. So it can't be because of the sound of the digging that startles the animal that would create liability on its own. Why? Because in one example, you exempt, in another case, you liable. So that, in addition to how the animal fell, plays a factor. In other words, it's a combination of factors, meaning the startledness of the animal, as well as the position that the animal fell into. And we're going to discuss the difference between Rav and Shmuel of liability of foul air versus impact. We did that in the previous daf. And the sound of a person digging, in other words, startling the animal, is that sufficient to create liability? And if it is, it cannot be a fact on its own because in another case you exempt. And is it seen as groma indirect because you didn't actually push the animal in? It was merely indirect of a sound. In other words, it was causative but not direct. Is that a factor? So we're going to go through that in the Gemara. Also, and we're going to end after this note, the Gemara discusses what type of damage the owner of the pit is liable to pay for. If the ox with its utensils fell into a pit and the utensils broke, or a donkey with its utensils fell into a pit and the utensils tore. So again, we did discuss before that oxen generally carry much more weight. They were seen as like buckies, okay, where they could take a lot of weight compared to a donkey. A donkey would take a small backpack and a person would ride it through the mountains, but an ox was a workhorse. It had a plow on it, it had a yoke. So that, what we mean by the utensil can break. In other words, it was a farming implement that was attached to the animal that could break if the animal fell in a pit. And what do we mean the utensils tore? How can a utensil tore? Or tear? A utensil isn't just an implement. It's known as something of utility, of use. Even clothing as a category is considered a utensil in terms of halachic status. Why? Because it has utility, it has use. So we learned that if a woman fell and ruined her garment, then you liable because you're not responsible for utensils that get damaged in the pit, but only for an animal and only damage to the person itself, but not death to a person. So these are factors that we have to discuss in terms of liability, etc. Okay, just one thing I want you to note. It says that you're exempt for paying for damage to utensils. We learned that before. So that the animal you're liable for, but not damage to utensils. That was an exception. Okay, just one other point. If an ox that is deaf, deranged, or young fell into a pit, the owner is liable. So that implies, again, that if you're liable because you created a pit, it's because the animal is in some way impaired. Why? because if it's therefore deranged, it's not able to discern that a pit is dangerous, therefore you're liable if you fell in. If it's young, it means the animal is inexperienced, and therefore you're liable because your pit did damage. But not if an animal is what's known as an intelligent, reasonably experienced animal. Now, it's the first time we're learning it. Up until now, we've learned that you're liable for pit damage, irrespective of the animal's status, if an animal fell into a pit. So we're going to see in what areas there's exemption or liability. If a young boy or girl, we're saying, but hang on a second, a young boy or girl is also inexperienced. Why would you not be liable then? Because there is a verse in Exodus, chapter 22, verse 31, stating if the person falls into a pit, there's no liability. Whether it's an adult or somebody that's younger, whether it's a boy or girl, you're liable for injury, but not for death. And that's why if a young boy or girl falls in a pit, as well as a Canaanite slave or maidservant, there is exemption for death, but not for injury. All right, guys, we're starting the Gemara, and on the Mishnah, we're just hitting the first two sentences. So it says, if the first one covered the pit after he used it, and the second one came to use it and found it uncovered, and he did not cover it, the second one is exclusively liable for any damage it does. Okay? I'm going to repeat this. It's important because we're going to go through this. If the first one covered the pit after he used it, and the second one came to use it and found it uncovered, and he did not cover it, the second one is exclusively liable for any damage it does. Okay? So it implies that the first one covered the pit after he used it. So do we mean that he literally covered the pit? Or do we mean that he handed the second one the manhole cover and expected the second one to cover it after he used it? So the Gemara is going to start its discussion. And the Gemara inquires about the Mishnah's first ruling. In other words, until when is the first one exempt? Okay. In other words, what does the Gemara mean when it says, and until when is the first one exempt? It means if he covered the pit after using it, and the second one found it uncovered, used it, and left it uncovered, how long does the second one remain exclusively liable and the first one remain exempt? That's what Rashi is asking. Okay. So, guys, can you call it back to me so I see you can understand Rashi's question?
Yes. Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is that the first one comes along and he leaves it. He covers. There's two options. He either covers it or he hands him the lid. And then the second one leaves it uncovered. So he passes by the second. So the second one either is present, he's given the lid, or he passes by. So when he passes by, how long is he responsible for? That's basically what Rush is saying. I mean, is he indefinitely responsible, or at some point does the liability become shared again? Maybe that's what they're getting at.
Okay, so Gavin, you are dead on the mark. There's just one point I wanted to add, is that apparently that it doesn't suffice that you just walk past and see something open. You have to have, as a second party, gotten use out of it in order to acknowledge responsibility as a shomer, as a guardian. So in other words, if the first one covered and the second one found it uncovered, either in the case found it uncovered, when Rashi uses in brackets, means the first one gave him the manhole, or the first person covered it and the second one used it and took off the manhole. How long is the second one exclusively liable and the first one exempt? So there has to be use from the second one. Okay, so there are three opinions that are cited. The first opinion is Rav, who said he is exempt until enough time passes for him to know that the pit is uncovered. Okay, so what do we mean when Rav said until enough time passes to know that it's uncovered? So the discussion by Rashi and Tosfot is, in other words, until he physically passes it again and sees it open. At that point, since both owners are aware of the hazard and neither party has done anything to eliminate it, they again share liability as partners. In other words, second one is aware, first one walks past, sees it's uncovered, they're both aware. Neither one did anything to remedy the situation, they both share liability. Okay, that's according to Rav. Now, Shmuel's got a different opinion. Shmuel said he is exempt until enough time passes. When we say he, we meaning the first one again, until people inform him that the pit is uncovered. Meaning, he doesn't have to see the hazard himself. If people have informed him of its existence, he becomes liable again for a share. Meaning, at that point, until people have told him, he's assuming that the second one put the manhole back. When there's a rumor, when people have actually told him that the cover, there's an open pit in Glen Hazel and people are walking past. At that point, when there's a witness to have told him, he now shares the liability because at that point he's responsible. But if the second one had uncovered the ball, he would still be fully liable. Why? Because if you remember in the Torah, it said in Shemot chapter 21, verse 33, that if one shall uncover a pit that his fellow dug and covered, he is fully liable for the damage it causes. Our case is different, guys. Why? Because the second one didn't uncover the ball. Okay? He merely found it uncovered. So we're talking, Gavin, in a case where the first one is liable to a certain extent because he handed him the lid, or he left it open and said to him, listen, cover it when you're done, or it was implicitly understood. Remember, there were different opinions we learned. But in any case, it's not as if the first one covered it and the second one came along. Because if the first one covered it and the second one came along, the first one wouldn't be liable at all. So we talk in the case when there was an exchange either by a cover, a manhole cover, a statement, a look of glances, etc., to know that he was abdicating responsibility to the second one. And why would he? Because the second one actually used it. But if he hears a rumor or sees for himself that the second one didn't cover it, at that point he becomes liable because he now is partly responsible to do something about it, since he's the one that handed in the cover. Okay, so now we've learned the difference between Rav and Shmuel. Rav said he has to see it. Shmuel said he has to be informed. There's a third opinion, Rav Yochanan. And Rav Yochanan said that basically the first one is exempt until enough time passes for people to, number one, inform him, and number two, for him to hire workers, cut down cedar trees, fashion a cover for the pit, and actually cover it. In other words, he has to basically need enough time to A, know about it, and B, to remedy the situation. You can't hold him liable, according to Rav Yochanan, unless he's given enough time to come up with a particular solution and cut a manhole down. Okay? So the intent is that the first one is exempt for whatever amount of time he needs to basically procure a proper cover for it. Does that make sense? And many people share that opinion. Now, just one thing to note, the second one who actually came and used the bore is still liable even before this measure of time that elapses. Why? Because, guys, if he saw that the first one didn't cover it, and there's something wrong with the cover, the second one has to appoint a watchman to make sure that nobody falls in. If you're holding by Rav Yochanan, does that make sense? Because he can't just leave it either. So it makes him also liable, the second one, because he needs to then make a cover. It's only when the first one becomes liable by either awareness, etc., that they share liability. But even according to Rav Yochanan, that there has to be a watchman if there's people not remedying the situation, or even if they are remedying it so that nobody gets damaged in the interim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it takes time to remedy, or you find the materials to remedy. So in the meantime, you put a watchman.
Exactly. In other words, a time to be informed, a time to remedy the situation, and the first one, if he's liable, in other words, the second one left it unguarded. The minute the first one knows, he's not exclusively liable, but he shares liability unless he hires a watchman in the interim to make sure, even according to Shmuel's opinion, you would see, or Rav, at the point where there's awareness, whoever becomes aware has to either guard it himself or hire somebody to guard it to prevent any damage. It doesn't suffice just to even be allowed the time to remedy the cover, because there's a difference between the letter of the law and a moral obligation. Okay, so according to Rav and Shmuel, even the first one is not given time to hire workers because he's obligated to appoint a guard over it. It's only according to Rav Yochanan, who said, listen, we're going to give you more time to actually make a manhole cover. So who's more stringent? Rav and Shmuel, because they allow less time. The minute the first one becomes aware from seeing it, according to Rav, or Shmuel, hearing it, he doesn't even have to see it. At that point, he either has to stand guard himself or hire somebody. Otherwise, he's culpable and shares liability with the second. Goes without saying the second one is liable. Okay. Now, I think we can end... I think we could end off, obviously, on that note. I'm happy to. All right.
Can I make one point here, Damon?
Of course.
So the first guy noticed there was no cover, there was no lid. So, and the second guy comes along and he informs him. So that's the situation. There was no lid to begin with. There was no cover to begin with.
Okay, just explain to me. I want to see if I understand.
Yeah. There were the first one. In this case, in the third opinion, where the second guy has to get cover manufactured and hire a shomer, a watchman, to guard this, to make sure the public don't fall in. There couldn't have been a cover to begin with. The first one noticed that there wasn't one. Then he informed the second guy.
No.
There wasn't one.
No, I'm pleased you brought it. I'm pleased you brought it up. It's not quite like that. Okay, so let me use an example in real terms. Kevin, you're the first one, and you're drawing water from the well, and you take off the manhole cover, and you're drawing water for your family. I mean, there wasn't exactly the water board of Johannesburg or Renana there. So anyway, you're drawing water from the cistern, and Gavin comes along, and you hand him the manhole cover, and you say, but I'm done. You take over from now. Make sure it's covered. We're just going according to the more stringent opinion where you have to hand over the cover. It's implicit. You don't even have to make a statement. Let's just saying, I'm handing you the manhole cover. Cover it when you're done. Like overly like covering. Is there a witness? Do you want to star? Just cover yourself. So that's the letter of the law. Then you come past a week later, you look at it and think there's no cover. At that point, according to Rav, you're liable. Now, you don't know what happened. Did the cover break? Did somebody else steal the manhole? Was there worminess? Was it degraded and the wood was rotten? Did an animal cry? You don't know. It doesn't matter. You handed him the cover. There wasn't a cover, but at the point where you know that something's wrong, you as the first person now become legally liable and Shemaim. That's according to Rav. According to Shmuel, you don't even have to see that the cover is missing. If somebody tells you, listen, I don't know if you heard, but there's a thing uncovered, and you realize a week ago that you handed the pit cover over to Gavin, at that point immediately you're liable. At that point, according to Shmuel, you have to hire somebody just to look after it until you make remedy of finding some sort of a cover for it. According to Rav, you have to see it. According to Shmuel, you only have to hear about it. But either way, at that point, you have to hire somebody. Otherwise, you share liability with the second person. Obviously, Gavin's liable as a second person, but you share it, both morally as well as legally. Now, Rav Yochanan is talking about something different. He's saying now, you need time now to manufacture a cover. Let me give you more time. And Rav and Shmuel saying, okay, but it's not good enough that you just need more time. Yes, you need more time, but there's a hazard you know about. Get somebody to protect it. You stay and watch or somebody else. And that's the bottom line of what we say. Does that make sense? At the point of knowledge, that's the point of culpability. Yeah.
So whether you hear it or whether you see it, at that point is when it starts.
Correct.